transforming problems into happiness. And so we're focusing in particular on the 8 verses of thought transformation on page 51 in this blue book. No, page 50. It's be written wrong at the front. Yes, it is. No, page 49. But anyway, we're up to page 50. I go by the contents page, but the contents page is wrong, which I just discovered. Okay, so so this is like we've jumped into the deep end of the pool, or at least had the great fortune to join, to be in the Mahayana tradition, or at least to whatever we decide, but to gain these teachings in the Mahayana tradition, which is how all the great bodhisattvas of the past have trained. And having just made, even though it was in Tibetan, it said we've made this, determination to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. So becoming a Buddha means becoming a bodhisattva. Becoming a bodhisattva means generating this mind of altruism. So out of these 8 verses, this mind of altruism, of loving kindness, compassion, and then ultimately conjoining that mind with wisdom, bodhicitta mind. And then the final verse is the wisdom, so ultimate bodhicitta.
Sorry, the heaters are still on, so whoever's leaving, they can make sure.
Thank you very much, Darren. Yeah. So there's Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when he was last here at the centre, was 2006, and Rinpoche was doing a tour around Australia and probably New Zealand. Yes, New Zealand. I know that's where I got ordained. Probably New Zealand. I think I would remember that. I do remember it. Anyway, and that was on this book, Transforming Problems into Happiness, by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So just some quotes from Rinpoche. In Mahayana thought transformation, also called mind training, or lo-jong, which is literally the Tibetan translated into English, mind training. And I always have this qualm, because you would say all of the Buddha's teaching is mind training, right? But this one specifically ups the ante in terms of focusing on transforming the afflicted states of mind. Okay, gives you very practical things to do. You use whatever problems you experience to generate the realizations on the path to enlightenment in your mind. So in other words, when problems come, as Rinpoche would say, wow, 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 amazing, amazing, fantastic, Just I think what Choden Rinpoche said to me when I was in hospital with pneumonia and not at his teachings. What he did also say, great, fantastic, better to purify in this lifetime rather than eons of hot hells. And I thought, one lifetime versus eons of hot hells, I think I'll take this, But I did say in my mind, I thought, don't bring it on, but not too much at once. We're sort of like that, aren't we? We're like, oh, am I up for it? What am I up for? So as Rinpoche says, instead of disturbing you, problems can actually help you to develop your mind. So we have this as, we talk about the people who rub us up the wrong way, and in the process we get smooth, as Tenzin Palmo said, they're like our sandpaper, they rub us up the wrong way and we get smooth. In other words, with Venerable Rene Fusi, so he's a teacher and great retreat and great monk in FPMT, and he said we're like dodgem cards. We keep bashing up against each other, but we've got to sort of become like the rubber, soft, smooth, become soft. And this is what we're doing with our mind. His Holiness says things like, that we're watering our mind, softening our mind with compassion. So this is this practice. Without practicing thought transformation, you'll be unable to complete your Dharma practice, your inner mental development. It sort of makes sense if we check up how our mind is on a day-to-day basis, moment-to-moment basis, and think, well, this is definitely, I have definitely not completed Dharma practice, because the afflictions arise without us inviting them in. They just seem to jump up before we even know they're there. But we can use that to say, okay, I know what to do with you lot now. So, yeah. So how do we, it says transform your mind, or how do we do that? How do we use problems in our Dharma practice for attaining happiness, transforming problems into happiness? So you use two different ways. First, we stop the thought of complete aversion to suffering, to difficulties, to problems, the thing that, all those things that we'd rather not have. But it's the nature of samsara, in nature to, experience difficulties, problems, and so on. Not because samsara is a place like this world system, but because it's a state of mind, or different states of mind that are disturbed, we talk about contaminated states of mind. We exaggerate the things, the negativity of the things we don't want and the positivity of the things we do want. So we set up craving and aversion, and a whole bunch of other things arise on top of that. This is not to beat ourselves up. It's just to recognize this is how things are. Pema Chodron says, start where you're at. She also has another book, When Things Fall Apart. I love her titles. Quick. I think they're the first two anybody ever reads. So first of all, we cultivate the mind of stopping the thought of just pushing suffering away, or that difficult person away, or so forth. And we've got to use our wisdom to see what we're capable of. As I said, bring it on, but not too much all at once, because what are we capable of? So we're gradually training. So that's the first one. And then the second one is we generate the thought of welcoming problems. As Lama Zopa says, wear your problems like earrings. It's sort of the earrings on the deities that you see around realize that represent, the jewels represent realizations. So earrings and necklaces and armlets, and this is like, because, so we can think about that phrase by Rinpoche, learn to love your no, that's a different one. What did I say? Wear them like earrings. It's sort of like a badge of your practice, that. But they also transform into, they are our source of happiness. So they're like beautiful earrings. Don't know if it works for you. That time that Rinpoche was here last time, I don't remember, I was here, but I don't remember seeing it happen. But maybe it was before I was here. I'm looking over here because it was over here. Rinpoche, it's not there now. See, in my mind, I got this generic image, which of course is not here that many years later. So Rinpoche was offered a bowl of ice cream with a cockroach on top. It wasn't a real cockroach, right? Just saying. It wasn't, it was a plastic cockroach, but that sense of, because he also said, learn to love your problems like you love ice cream. So there was the cockroach. That's the problem on top of the ice cream. So you can have fun with it, right? So the welcoming problems, we hear great stories of great practitioners of the past, like Lama Tisha, I think, who had a cook who was, everyone else found obnoxious, but to have someone who would really rub him up the wrong way, given it was very hard to rub him up the wrong way, but to keep the practice present. As I mentioned last week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says it's very difficult for him to practice like that, because everyone around him is so nice that he fancy going seeking out problems, difficulty. Well, I have to say, in my experience of the world, I'd have to go looking for them. Yeah. So, and as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, he said, from the time I could think, I practiced bodhicitta. Right. And we know he's a reincarnated, he's a Buddha, he's, got the goods. And you think from the very moment, as, I don't know, what is it, about between 12 months and 18 months, or when is it kids start talking? Come on, some of you are parents, somebody, Yeah, you're the doctor. Come on.
Yeah.
12 months, yeah. Unless they've got parents. See, I remember one of my brothers, I think their first daughter took a bit longer to talk because she didn't have to communicate through talking. Like, if your needs are being met. Anyway, you want to communicate if the communication is received by other means. So they did. When she was, not long after she was born, they found out the only way that she could go to sleep was if she was in the middle of things, not off in some side room. She had to be right center. She must have been Tibetan in the previous life. Okay, so Lama Zopa, again, going on with looking at some of the ways that we, I guess, conventionally, which is what we do conventionally in a world, as I said, in our motivation, a time of great degeneration, and think that this is a very difficult time of practice because we can see around us how much anger, how much conflict, it's just on the rise, craziness, and not blaming anyone for anything, but it's very difficult to then want to practice virtue, want to practice, we're, as I said, I don't have to go looking for problems. Things happen all the time. And we're in a society where a lot of negativity is on the rise. Like when COVID came and His Holiness said, after COVID, we'll have famine, conflict, people at war with everyone. Lama Zopa said, everyone, every level, from interpersonal to worldwide, and we see that all happening. And people blame social media, but I say, well, it's the user, actually. It's the user. Social media can be used for good, and it is used for good. So it's just a technology. It has no, but this is one of the exaggerations that we do, that we get it wrong, and we blame that. And we think, actually, it's the minds of those who are using that. And I think, why am I using it? What's going to be beneficial? Versus just go blah. So, or even, sorry to any chefs here, but people just, this is what I'm eating today. I mean, why do you want to put it on social media? If we think about it, fine, enjoy what you're eating. But are we sort of promoting attachment? Just as us as Dharma practitioners, I'm not talking about the rest of the world, just thinking what we're using it for. Anyway, go and put the tormas on social media very happily. This is what I've offered on my altar today. So one way of thinking about it is seeing whatever suffering occurred as the blessings of the Buddha, of the Gurus. And this is what Chökyi Rinpoche was saying to me. Fantastic. It's a blessing to be able to, for us to make sense with in this human life, with our mind functioning and us wanting to cultivate virtue, that this is a blessing. We say that this is a blessing of the Buddhas, of the Gurus. We receive that blessing if our mind's open to receiving that blessing. We talked previously about the 3 pots, and if we're very opinionated and got the closed mind, then it doesn't go in. We don't experience it. We don't feel it. So one of the Kopan November course retreat leaders, Venerable Kayamana, she led the retreat quite a while ago. She's an Australian, but she was working. She's back in Australia now, but she was in Amsterdam at the centre there teaching. Why am I saying all this? She talked about when she first encountered Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and she was a sort of young when she first engaged with the Dharma, and she'd hear Rinpoche's teachings. She says, and then one day it was like the experience of these blessings, that this sort of just this flood of, I guess, feel good feelings, light, whatever. She did talk about light. And it's that thing of when our mind is receptive, like clearly the mind was already receptive, but then it was suddenly more receptive. And so this is really part of our development, part of developing this in stages, because this really is the deep end of the pool. So if you hear him go, "No way, Jose," which is like the 8 verses, you go, "What?" Boy, oh boy. Then just, we've got to be patient with ourselves, with our practice. But when we have a problem, think this is a blessing of the Buddhas, because I've got all the right conditions in this life to make sense of it, at least. To make sense of, people around us dying suddenly or dying at all, or so forth, or getting serious illnesses and so forth. We may not understand it completely, but we've got a framework, at least, that the Buddha said, this samsaric world is in the nature of suffering. So what do we expect? So when the blessings come, it's like a brilliant shower of radiance, of joy, of light, and so forth. So we can think this situation that's coming, particularly if we make use of it well, is purifying me. It's exhausting past negative karma. So we say that in any moment you have the fruition of past negative karma. Like once it's there, it's there. Once I had pneumonia, I couldn't not have pneumonia, actually, for quite some time. And so it had ripened. Fortunately, it had ripened in some ways as a physical illness. But at a time when Chökyi Rinpoche was teaching, and instead of being in the Gompa, I was in the hospital, except when I sat on the side of my bed and waited for them to give me day release so I could go to the teachings. Can I go? Can I go? So anyway, so it's taking the situation. And the other thing is, it made me very much appreciate, we talk about, we have created the conditions for things to come together. It made me realize that even, thought I was going to be there in the Gompa, sitting healthily in the teachings, and it didn't happen. And it makes you appreciate when things don't come together, that it really is, an obstacle when things don't come together. But they did sort of come together, because somebody would bring me the recording of the teachings, and then I had, by Geshe Samton, I had Chökyi Rinpoche's advice what to do next. So, my hospital bed, it became my meditation room, because I just pulled the curtain around, particularly early in the morning before, doctor's rounds and things like that. I mean, doctor's rounds are necessary, but, get up early and before breakfast and do practice, doing my nyondro for prostrations. Yeah. So, so think this situation is purifying, exhausting that negative karma. And then even our Jewish friends have that idea, good, one more karmic debt repaid, right? So it's, and giving the opportunity to train our mind in this sort of thought transformation, so that I can achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we welcome the problem as an opportunity to train our mind. Now, this is not necessarily a problem, but it could be a qualm. So one of my Dharma friends from Sydney, well, she doesn't live in Sydney anymore, nor do I. But anyway, back in the day when the centre was in Newtown, and so King Street, Newtown, there'd often be people on the street asking for money and so forth. And so she embraced that as the opportunity for her to practice generosity. And she'd thank the people when she gave them something. And they'd say, shouldn't I be thanking you? Why are you thanking me? She wouldn't say, because you've given me the opportunity to, like, So if you're looking for those sorts of opportunity, Vic Park's pretty full of them. So that's not necessarily a difficulty, but just taking any situation as an opportunity for practice. Of course, just naming another one that was a difficulty, one of our Dharma friends over in Raleigh, North Carolina, visited, some of you heard me say this, they visited the guy in prison who had murdered his son because he recognized, in terms of suffering, this guy, the perpetrator, his suffering was just beginning. And so the father of the one murdered knew that because of his Dharma practice and Dharma studies, knew that his suffering was ending. Yes, that karma had ripened, would certainly ripen for his son. And taking that situation into the path, he then went into prison. That's how he engaged with visiting in prison with the Liberation Prison Project to run workshops for the people in prison, the guys. He was visiting a men's prison, the guys, and he did that all on forgiveness, like how to forgive yourself. It's the beginning. We were talking after, again, last teachings yesterday about somebody said, we Tibetans, the easiest answer to every problem is forgiveness. So that was his perspective, right? And so we're talking about forgiveness to others. And I said, oh, well, in our culture, I think forgiveness to ourselves is the hardest one, right? Because we beat ourselves up, oh, I shouldn't have, blah, 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 blah. Well, probably you shouldn't have to, but we don't have to beat ourselves up. We can transform that into, for any harm that I've done, to myself or others, I forgive myself. You can use that, take that into a meditation, rather than the alternatives, which is keep beating ourselves up, right? Which just creates more problems. Yeah. Then using suffering to train in taking refuge. So Rinpoche says there are uncountable results of past karma I have yet to experience. Oceans of samsaric suffering is why we do, like last week we were talking about Vajrasattva practice we mentioned in passing, doing purification practice. Only Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the three rare sublime ones, have the power to liberate me from true suffering and true causes of suffering. So first, the Four Noble Truths of the teachings of the Buddha, that, and the next one coming along, there is a cessation of that once we purify our mind, and then how to do it, the fourth. So if the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha have the have the ability, especially through the Dharma, through the teachings, the power to direct me, to liberate completely from all of samsara. In other words, we don't want this suffering, we still have an active aversion to it. Why wouldn't they have the capacity to liberate me from this problem I'm experiencing right now, which is not the whole of samsara, it's just this one problem. So we use that for taking refuge. So I guess, even before we cultivate an aversion for samsara, we take refuge. Okay. Take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, like going for the guidance to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So having that idea of no matter how bad my life gets, I'll never give up the Dharma. I'll never give up refuge. No matter how many problems I have, I'll as His Holiness Dalai Lama says, never, never give up. And again, hearing yesterday, Rab, who was the one who was talking about forgiveness, but he was also, as many Tibetans, a lot of the Tibetans in the Tibetan community. I'm not saying not the females, because if you ever want to read a very profound book about that, Sorrow Mountain, about, she ended up a nun in Dharamsala and set up a organization for women, but she started off in Tibet at the time of the Chinese invasion, and then she was imprisoned for 20 years, and her story of that is graphic, really intense suffering, because they were trying to get the Tibetans to rat on each other, and nobody did. And so they took the suffering, and they took it without we're, you know, having this idea of it's a ripening of their own karma, right? Anyway, there was a good end to the story. We like a good end to our stories, don't we? But Rob was talking about that. He was a monk, and I can't remember all the details, but he went to prison, I think, he said 3 times, but the 3rd time and they were let off.
The last one was quicker.
Yeah, one was for what, a couple of days or a couple of weeks. Karma was for a couple of months. And anyway, so they were trying to get into India, of course. But he packed his backpack full of books, Dharma books. And so when they got caught, he said, we're going to Mount Kailash. And it's just like, Mount Kailash isn't that way, it's that way. Oh, okay. They got off, yeah. Susan.
Confusion.
Mm.
So there's this whole, there's our karma.
Yes.
By action.
Correct.
And then there's the mind.
Yes.
Which has all these tendencies either towards the good or the
Both, actually. It's got all of it. Yeah.
And I'm sort of wondering kind of how where these all fit together.
Okay.
How they fit together.
Yeah. So we talk about, so karma literally means action, but we can think also every action of our body, speech, and mind. So every thought lays an imprint in our mind, which we also call karma. It's a karmic imprint. And if it's a negative one, we can use all these practices in this life to purify it so that we don't have to experience the result of that, because karma multiplies. So what we experience, say the wars in the world and something or so forth, it's a collective experience, but the degree to which we experience it throughout the world, we're not in the middle of a war situation right here, literally in Perth. But so we don't experience like they do in the Middle East or Ukraine or other places, direct, intense. And so you'd say that's the ripening of some past karma. It might have been, you know, one nasty interaction how many lifetimes ago, but now the karma's multiplied with that. So as long as that sits on your mental continuum without being purified, then I like to think it like festers, you know, grows, it multiplies. So it is an actual imprint on our mind. Tendency, as you said, is a good word. But also the tendencies we have towards good, to virtue, is also a karmic imprint from our past virtue, from our past actions of generosity, ethics, and so forth. Being good people, or whichever being we were. You know. So, and so we have those tendencies, otherwise we wouldn't be here, because we'd be like, you know, we'd just be out there creating negativity all the time, creating havoc in the world. Fortunately, we're not. So it is very much integral in the mind. It's not, it's like a deposit. It's like the pollution, it's described as the pollution of our mind. And then that manifests into the afflicted states of mind. So say I had one moment of anger that I didn't purify, and so then I get born in this life as a raging, you know, about to go off, let off steam and so forth. Or I just can't control that anger, right? Unless you meet the Dharma, in which case we're given methods to control that. So they're sort of very much integral, but they're not actual, like our mind in its pure state, which is why it can be purified. And that's why we use, like, you know, the idea of pure water, the purity of water. We know water can get polluted, but we also know we can filter it. So that's our practice, is filtering the mind of all the afflictions, all of those. And, you know, with the karmic imprints, like when we do, say, Vajrasattva practice with the 4 opponent powers, and we talk about having a mind of regret of what we've done, So it may have been that negative interaction I had with somebody this morning that I want to purify. And then you just add on. And anything I've done with my body, speech, and mind, any harm I've done to any being, body, speech, and mind, any being, which also includes ourselves, any being, in all past lifetimes. So it's sort of like whatever hasn't been purified. So it's nice. We call to mind specifics, otherwise it gets a bit, not, I'd say intangible, or yeah. It's like we've got to have an actual, yes, I'm purifying this one, but we can say anything else I've done in this life and in all past lives, and any potential for karmic to past negative karma to ripen in my mental continuum, just cover it all, you know. So the stronger the regret that we have with that, the stronger the purification. But it's not like, you know, I was leading a Vajrasattva retreat at, which was just the 5-day retreat at Chen Rezig, and somebody who was new to the practice. And after a day said, well, if I've done all this purification, why do I have to keep coming tomorrow? And the matter is, we keep checking our mind. You know, we use that analogy of, first of all, like a cloth that the first layer of dirt you might be able to shake out or so forth. And then it gets more and more difficult. You put it in the wash, and then you've got to soak it, and then you know, scrub hard or whatever. The more it feels like I'm conflated with that anger. My mind is cognitively fused with it, but it's not. We just have to be able to identify it, and then know how to remedy that, how to use an opposing state of mind, a positive state of mind. So this is our training. So at the time that we're having past karmic results, including this gorgeous sunny day, we would say it's a result of virtue. Now, I'm not a Buddha. I can't say what virtue, but maybe it was something to do with the environment, you know, maybe. But on the other hand, we talk about the elements in our body and the elements outside being connected. So when the elements in the body are out of balance, the elements around us, you know, that anger that arises can have reverberations out into the environment around us. We know that, we feel that, we experience that when the anger is strong enough, you know. Well, we usually experience from somebody else's anger in terms of feeling the vibe. So anyway, we are experiencing this sunny day as a result of virtue. And of course, there will be, the Bureau of Meteorology will say why we're experiencing from a conventional worldly point of view. So every pleasant experience we have is also like this blessing of the Buddhas, or you know, alternately, we see it as a ripening of our own virtuous karma, that then the Buddhas are delighted, and you know, we say it like that we get the blessings. We have an experience of joy, and we want more of that, right? And so at the same time, we're laying down those karmic imprints for our future experiences. So then we think, well, what do I want to experience in the future? More joy, more things going well, more pleasant experiences. I mean, that's a healthy approach, right? So if I want that more, this is why we take this as a training to, okay, let me not create causes for further suffering. Let me create causes for more and more pleasant experiences, minimum, you know, our experience of positive emotions, yeah? Positive thoughts, positive actions. So it's a training. And, you know, training like this, you know, is using our problems to train on, in reliance more and more on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Because I have to say for myself, honestly, when some difficulty comes, because, you know, my mind is not in sync with the Dharma, it's not the first thing, I think, to go for refuge, right? When a problem comes. But it'd be the best thing. Problem comes. Go for refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you know. So just recalling that is a powerful state of mind, because they're the three most powerful objects. Our gurus are the most powerful objects. So, you know, I mean, I've heard stories, other people say, what would Lama Zopa do in this situation? And so then they imagine what Rinpoche would do and then do like that, or at least what they've imagined Rinpoche would do in that situation. So this is, and you know, that's the first half of the four opponent powers, is that power of reliance on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. You know, I'm not there yet. And this is what we're doing all the time. For the Dharma, we're relying on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? And so, and then, of course, the second part of that power of reliance on the Mahayana Bodhisattva path is reliance on other sentient beings. And this is where the real work begins, of the afflictions that arise in relation to others. And it would seem to be, in my experience, it's not the I read this morning, there's the ratio of ants to humans is 2.5 million to 1, right? But who do I need to do my most practice with? That one who annoys me, that I have the mind of aversion towards, etc. I can very happily, well, observe, as I have, the ants and their positivity, the ways in which they're communal and help each other out and so forth, if you have a look. And so using that way, rather than thinking, what are the ants doing in my cupboard? Or actually, it used to always be the sink, wasn't it? Up at Chendesk, it was always in the sink. They're probably in the cupboard as well, but they were very obvious once they're in the sink. Yes. Yes.
And we seem to have a wrong view about the situation. Like, say a child gets killed when it's, pushing you over with its mother.
Yeah.
I don't know, even a moment's inattention, and yet the person, that's an example.
No, it's a good example, yeah.
They take that on in a way that is totally angry.
Yes.
So is that about, I kind of don't know how
well, there's
that person gets out of that.
Yeah.
I mean?
So there is, of course, anguish. I mean, one, your child's been killed, so there's a lot of grief, anguish, shock, and that's natural. You don't want to deny that. But when you...
Oh, sorry, I just thought the last part of my question. Sorry.
Okay, go.
So is that a denial? I think that's the word that triggered it on some level, just of life and death.
Yes. So we have an expectation that my child's not going to die before I do, and not today, right? But it's a lack, of course, it's a, not understanding that death can come at any time. Time is not certain, because, we're very fortunate to have those teachings. And as difficult as it is, that situation, it's like, okay, I'm not totally responsible for this situation. I mean, I may not even be responsible at all for this situation. So if that child got killed, who killed them? Wasn't me, right? And a lot of people blame the other one and get angry and all of that sort of thing. There's a whole lot of layers of things. And it's not to say, it's not to just say, I'm not responsible for anything. It's not dismissing it, but saying this is a result of many complex causes, conditions arising at that moment. It's not just one thing. So if I blame myself totally for it, I'm blaming one person for this scenario, right? It's just not realistic. It's not in sync with reality.
I'm also wondering if it's a kind of denial that we all have about, when you talk about the reality of samsara.
Yeah.
Like, we don't live even with ourselves with this idea that we're going to die.
No.
In a minute. Like, it's an incredibly hard thing to come to terms with and kind of believe.
Yeah.
so that there's constantly this kind of gap
Yes.
between
Reality and our what we can
bear, if you like.
Yes. And I guess this is the training of the bodhisattva, is to be able to bear, not all at once, but more and more difficulties, more and more confronting situations, more and more problems. We don't need to go looking for them, they'll be there, but to not be completely overwhelmed by it. And also, if you look at that scenario with the parent of the child killed, that it's very, in a weird way, it's an ego-based thing, self-centered based thing, thinking I'm responsible. You know, we usually talk about that self-centered in terms of wanting to look after number one, ourselves, but it's also that focus on the self that doesn't exist. And so it's totally out of sync with reality. Like, I don't have the power over life and death. Right?
Yeah, you don't understand all that stuff about ego and self.
No, you don't. You suffer more. And this is why the Buddha taught, because he could see all this suffering of beings. And the whole purpose is to relieve us of suffering, to say, hey, there is a way through this. There is a way of thinking, of transforming our mind. And it's not, you know, you sort of go, be free of suffering. Things still happen, but how our mind responds to it is what we're transforming. Right? That's what we're transforming, how my mind responds to that. You know? So me being in hospital with pneumonia, just continuing on with that one example, of course I went to, you know, Chodron Rinpoche had arrived, we'd greet him to the centre, blah, blah, and then I was in hospital. So what do I do first? Poor pity me. It's not fair. I'm not there, I'm here. At the same time, because I'd been in Nepal and India and they thought, in case I was infectious, I did get a room on my own until the results came back. And then I was like in the ward. And then I got staff and I was back in a room on my own. I thought, actually, I've got good dignity here, because where they had the television ledge for the television, which I didn't have a television, perfect altar space. So put up my little altar there. So when you had your own room, you had a bit more space to do things like that. So not that I went looking for a room on my, I didn't look for further disease. So thank you very much. But anyway, so, but that's a training of the mind to say I went from poor pity me to, because I'd had the Dharma practice, to eventually having the thought, there were some hours, oh, perhaps I could ring Geshe Thubten and see what practice to do right now, because I've got the Dharma. I'm still stuck in my stuff, but I've got someone I can ask for guidance in that situation. So this is that parent didn't have that go-to, right? And this is why for us it's also very, very it's so precious, you know, having these opportunities. So as we hear this, it's not to say, oh, I don't do that, I don't do that. It's saying, wow, I have these opportunities, and when I'm stuck, I can just ask. Right? Yeah. And so using these difficult situations as a teaching, I guess, in themselves, to saying, well, if I don't like this problem, if I don't like this illness, if I don't like that person, if I don't like my reactions, then I've got to abandon the cause, which is my own non-virtue. In other words, if I keep doing what I did to get me in that situation, I'm going to continue to experience that, right? Again, people who don't have the Dharma don't know about this. So we do, when we do these practices like Vajrasattva, which we do here once a month, and is it when's Dr. Tashi starting the prostrations? Next Tuesday night. That's similar. The prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, another practice that we do for purification, where the motivation part of that in our books that we have for that practice goes through the whole of the 4 opponent powers. So we're covered. So we have, you know, at the end of that practice, we talk about the restraint, you know, of making a commitment not to engage in that negativity again. realistically, because if we're not being realistic, I can't say I'll never have another moment of anger in this life. I wish I could say that, but honestly, I cannot say that. But I can say that I'm working on diminishing that anger, and transforming, that into the opposite, the opposite to anger of either patience or loving kindness. Patience if it's with myself, say, although loving kindness works as well, but towards others. So you've got to know the antidote. And so that way, the experience of the difficult problem becomes a powerful teaching for us, right? And again, we're practicing. Okay, we just, practicing to the best of our abilities. And then this is the one we all want to do, using suffering, not necessarily using suffering, but to find joy in positive action. So if I really want to find happiness, what's the opposite? That's the opposite to suffering. Then I have to make effort to practice its cause, the positive actions, which only ever bring us joy. Any positivity that we engage in, any kindness we show to others, any difficult situation we get through without having a conflict, right? Things like that. We think about it and in terms of positivity, because, okay, maybe I didn't do something positive, but I restrained from doing something negative. Is very, very, I didn't swear at them, I didn't fight them, whatever. So whatever we do, we want to make it so that we make, create the conditions for our positivity, positive actions to increase, our beneficial actions to increase, and deliberately to do that. If I think to myself, okay, what am I going to say in this situation? Or when I'm going to say something, can I say something that's wholesome, as a Buddha would say? And I was reading an article in the, is it called that Seniors magazine, something now?
Oh, the Western Australian one.
Yeah, that one. And it was about what the meaning of wholesome, because the Buddha talked about wholesome deeds. And so it was really good to read this article from a non-Dharma perspective, and someone talking about, the sense of well-being and health and so forth as being everything that is wholesome, and we create wholesome conditions in our lives. In other words, we look after ourselves. And then, by extension, when we're engaging in this mind training, to enhance that ability to be able to extend that benefit out to others. So then it says, rejoice or take joy, delight in those positive actions. They themselves bring joy, that it's sort of like, it's a wholesome pride in our abilities or in our handling of situations. Job well done. Pat yourself on the back. Rejoice. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche has emphasized this again and again and again. So when we do the 7-limb prayer, for example, and the limb on rejoicing, joy, then, Rinpoche always has it, like we have that when we do the Medicine Buddha puja here. It's numerous times that we're saying the 7 limbs. And so we get to the limb of rejoicing, and Rinpoche says, stop. Rejoice in all your own positive actions. Rejoice in, which we call merit, or creates merit, which I guess you'd say the merit is like those positive imprints on our mental continuum, or create those positive imprints. And so we're creating more and more tendencies in that mind towards positivity or engaging in positive things. It's not being Pollyanna. It's like, no, I can be kind. I can be patient. I can use my wisdom mind rather than my ratty mind that says I just want to get back at them, so forth. So like this, rejoice in that for ourselves. And Rinpoche says all our past, present, and future. So any positive actions we have done, are doing, will do, because the will do comes from what we are doing now. And then of all other ordinary beings. So there's a whole other teaching about rejoicing in the merit of those who maybe don't have the Dharma, or don't, are not as engaged as you in the Dharma. And so you get double their merits. Instead of double demerits, we get double merits. Right? And then those who are in the same, you get the same. Those who are more advanced, you get half of theirs. And then all the way up to the Buddhas, you get a 10th of the merit of the Buddhas. Given that is immeasurable, I always go for that one. Buddhas, past, present, and future, inseparable from your gurus, and just think, wow, because then I'm creating, sort of positive imprints on my mental continuum that will ripen and continue to ripen in future lifetimes. We've done it to gain not only this life, but for this life to be what we say a perfect human rebirth, that we've got all the conditions and interest and so forth to practice Dharma. It's as good as it gets. I've created, from all my past, whatever is virtue accumulations that's ripened in this life, usually practice of generosity, ethics, having in the context of keeping vows, taken and keeping vows in past lives. And we know how difficult it is if we take vows in this life to hold that. We know how difficult it is to train our mind like this, but to think we have done it previously. So there's no mistake that we're back here in a Gompa. And even together, we've been together before, don't know when, don't know where, probably many times, but in a context of Dharma, right? In a context of having vows, I always like to think, what monastery was I? When I first went to, actually the only time I've been to Nalanda, the now in ruins, Nalanda Monastery near Rajagir. And we were walking around and going, maybe that was my bedroom. And then I realized I was being very arrogant. I thought, well, maybe I was the ant or cockroach crawling around on the floor. But it's a wonderful aspiration to have, right? It's great. So yeah, take great rejoicing. And there are meditations on rejoicing, which are wonderful, where you rejoice in, somebody you know's had a good news. Something's really good's happened for them. Wow, fantastic. We don't get jealous. Anytime a jealous thought arises, that's the thing to transform in fantastic, good on you. You see that if we see the jealousy arise, oh, that's not fair. I wanted to do that. I want to do that. You get to do it. You got the job I wanted. That's one, isn't it? Great. So we transform our mind like that into rejoicing. And, people who inspire us, there's many people in the world who inspire us. And it really goes against this mind that gets depressed or overwhelmed or so forth. It's like, there are actually amazing people in the world doing amazing things. And not just people, animals. And it's like, really, saving lives and so forth, looking after others who are not of their own species. So, all those who inspire us, and then rejoicing in our own good qualities as well, because that increases, it brings them to mind. My patience with myself. I was patient. I didn't beat myself up because I didn't do that. I was patient and understanding, patient with illness, which again, that situation taught me a lot about patience with illness because I kept going in and out of hospital. Patience with, with others, obviously. Yeah. And rejoicing that we've actually met the Buddha's teachings in such degenerate times. In other words, it's much harder to practice. And this is where the Kadampa masters who developed these lo-jong trainings said, to be out of step with society. I mean, most of the time we're wanting to fit in, isn't it? Not to create waves. We don't want to create waves necessarily, unless it's something beneficial to someone. It's like being a doctor, isn't it? You've got to say things that people don't want to hear, but it's for their benefit. Yeah, but there's a lot to rejoice in that. So it's a very practical example. That's a wonderful example. You know, that we've met the Dharma, we're interested to engage, we've got fellow students to discuss with, and, you know, we can discuss with each other. There's not someone telling you can't do that, you know, there's not, you're not going to be shot for engaging in Dharma. It happens, right? So, yeah, we can rejoice in all the conditions, the health that we have, you know. So again, it's not being arrogant, it's just saying, well, while I've got this healthy body, I've got a healthy mind, I've got all these conditions, I've got the Dharma, what else do I need in my life? Just to practice, right? We might need a few coffees or, I don't know, cakes along the way, something like that. So in that way, every difficulty that comes along, we can sort of mix the problem we're experiencing with Dharma. And this is what I was just trying to think of, the verse where it says, may I make my mind the Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles. The path won't be without obstacles for a very long time. A path being without obstacles means we have completely purified our mind. So the mind in its nature is pure, like pure water, uncontaminated, unpolluted. But what pollutes it is these afflicted states of mind. We could say those karmic imprints, they say karma and delusions, karma and afflictions. But the fact that we can purify it is what gives us hope and gives us practices in order to do that. And so if we don't want suffering, of course, hopefully we don't want suffering, we have to develop the causes and conditions to experience less and less suffering. So for however long you've engaged in Dharma or have met the Dharma, and just you can check back, you know, am I as frequently angry as I was so much time ago, last year or the year before or whatever? Have I, you know, sort of, is my mind more turning towards virtue? So this is like renouncing samsara, is renouncing, or the wish to definitely emerge from the suffering, which we call renunciation, is just that thought is mixing our mind, even though our mind right now is deluded, polluted, and so forth, but we are mixing it with virtue. It might not yet be pure virtue, might still have quite a few strings attached, but we're wishing to engage in virtue more and more. It might take us, like me being in hospital that time, a few hours before I realised to stop doing the poor pity me and actually ask for help. But at least it came, right? At least it came.
Your way of tracking progress as well.
It's a way of tracking progress. Yes, it is. No, it's good to track progress over time, because we sort of think, oh, I can't, it's not, you know, nothing's changing. And if you look back, you'll realise things have changed, right? Things have changed. I mean, it hasn't, you know, we're not completely there yet. It's a long haul. This is where the patience comes in.
I found too, I was thinking is that change, it's so incremental.
Yes.
Because working, I think even just working with anger, patience is like such a, and learning is such a big deal.
Yes.
Because then you get to a certain point and it seems like another whole thing.
I know, it's like, oh, well, you dealt with that. Now here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. No, you don't think, oh, you think, great, next one.
No,
I dealt with that one. Hey. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of acknowledges all of that. And I also I'm just realising now, I'm actually finding it strangely easy to put myself out more for people, you know?
Yeah, because you're training in that and it becomes easier with time.
It's just sort of in the field, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Imagine if it was right up front centre. Left field for now.
like it.
No, but at least it's in left field, where it was maybe outside the boundaries. Yeah, yeah. It is, but it's worth it.
It's nice to get the sort of more, put things together and get more removed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And it is like we can, and this is why it was always advanced and in, you know, back in Tibet at the time, it was passed on to those whose minds were ready for it, because it's like saying, jump into the deep end of the pool where you haven't learned to swim, you know, so it is an incremental thing. And realizing that as long as we're in samsara, as long as we're in this suffering situation, we're never going to be truly independent or truly free or truly in control of our lives. In fact, we're not. The more we try and control our lives. I mean, I gave up on this a long time ago. I made a 5-year plan and nothing came to fruition out of that 5-year plan. I thought, easy solution, abandon 5-year plans. Set a general direction. General direction Dharma. That seems to work. So it seems our experience that we're always either dependent on or at the mercy, you know, of our suffering. So the enemy that we talk about that destroys what is wholesome and good. This is from Dodrupchen Jigme Tempa Nyima, anyway, whose text Transforming Suffering into Happiness says, anything that is wholesome and good, what destroys that is arrogance and pride. So needing to deal with the attitude that belittles others and considers that as them as inferior. And I think we can also say that belittles ourselves, right? Oh, I can't, I'm no good, and all of that. And we set up doubts, we set ourselves up for not even trying, because we say that's impossible. So in terms of overcoming arrogance and pride, this is where we look at the second verse, wherever I am and whoever I'm with, or whenever, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche, whoever I'm with, I always consider myself the lowest of all. No, the whenever's later. Wherever I am and whoever I am with, I always consider myself the lowest of all. So this is saying to be humble, right? So in whatever circumstances, whoever I am, whether they're someone, you know, I regard as important, whether it's someone close to me, someone I don't know, or even people I have difficulty with, you know, that considering myself the lowest of all is not saying that we become a doormat. Oh, you know, everyone's much better than me. But it's like to overcome our self-cherishing pride that regards others as inferior and ourselves as superior. That's a real major obstacle to our bodhicitta, to cherishing others. So we look at what those beings that we consider maybe insignificant. You know, again, if I go back to my aunts, just had to spend a lot of time with aunts at January Institute. We all did. So if I think about an ant, it has very little capability, well, it doesn't have any, to practice Dharma, to cultivate its mind. But has it got any less purpose of living? So we can look at the positivity of ants. They seem to just go about them. They're very industrious, right? Everyone says they're very industrious. They're not engaging in negative actions. They're very simple. They don't have the complicated minds of us humans. Like, they don't have the devious minds of us humans. They go about their busy business. And it's got a really straightforward life. And as I said, you know, they help each other out. Right? But they don't have the capacity for Dharma. As a human being, yes, we have infinite potential to cultivate virtue. So in a sense, we've got a responsibility not to misuse that, not to misuse our capacities. Thinking about, well, me, you know, nearly labeled Dharma practitioner, but I have vows and I have commitments and I have the full human potential. I've got all the conditions, best conditions. And so what we call sophisticated mind, human intelligence. So, but if I use all that in the wrong way, then I'm worse than that ant who doesn't have all those capabilities. Right? So, in a sense, we need to deal with our arrogance or pride that maybe sees others as, well, they're insignificant to my career or to my family or even to my Dharma practice. But having this sort of humble attitude, you know, again, thinking about this morning in terms of having a mind of humility instead of putting out there my opinion because it's right, actually listening to others. And it's a win-win to just listen because you learn a lot more. You learn different perspectives. And people like to be listened to. So if I want to be a bodhisattva, I want to put people in. I want to make them feel comfortable. I want to feel like I'm interested in them. You know, so just that act of listening, I think, is an act of humility rather than, oh, I know all about that or, you know, whatever, you know, which can be, again, is the ego saying, look at me, look at me. Is it Kath and Kim? Look at me, look at me, look at me. Yeah. So, you know, there's with our minds full of pride or feeling it's an inadequacy, isn't it? Feeling I've got to prove myself or say, you know, I know more than you do, or I know that stuff, etc. You know, there's no way that we can be happy. It's a very agitated state of mind. You know, we might be jealous of others, look down on them, get angry, you know, in any way, create a very unpleasant atmosphere. And the thing of humility, because I look at, you know, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I'm a simple Buddhist monk. You know, I'm living with simplicity within ourselves. I'm not talking about what the house looks like or anything else like that. I'm talking about within ourselves, just being like the ants, straightforward. Yeah.
Are there any specific practices and this is an attitude?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine loving kindness.
Loving kindness. And as I said, listening's a good thing. And that, you know, the humility that, okay, that's the opposite. There's many ways I can have that perspective of terms of looking at, again, at those who have greater capacity than me in the world. Even within the Dharma practice, of course, we can look to our teachers, we can look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and not both as a model of humility, but also as someone who has great realizations and never even mentions it, you know, right? That I don't have to big note myself, but also at the admiration, like how many, you know, all the scientific endeavors or the, I don't know if you're into sports or the Olympic gold medalists, all of the, you know, great chefs, and it doesn't take much to be a better chef than me, So all the skills and so forth that people have, and really have a deep appreciation for, you know, others. I could have a deep appreciation for fellow Dharma practitioners who are practicing, have deep appreciation for my teacher, have deep appreciation for all those people who have the skills that make houses that we can live in. Like we could just, you know, perspective, and thinking the one other way of that's often presented as thinking about it, I'm just one person out of all the beings in the world, 8.2 billion, I'm just one, right? What's so important about me? So you think each one of those has to value. I don't know them all, but to value those. And of course, even though there's a lot of disharmony and so forth, I think the majority of people in the world are being good people, you know, the benefit of working for the benefit of society. So it can be the doctors, it can be the anyone working in a service profession, people who are volunteering, this, that, you know, many, we can just, you know, put it in perspective. That's what you're saying. You know?
If you apply for that, you probably don't have a very realistic evaluation of your own.
No, because it's sort of, that's why I'm saying it's an inadequacy, because you don't even value your own. It's true.
Yeah, but if you can get a better perspective of your own skills and not to count them, not being like perfectionism, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to, you know, like, blah, 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 whatever. To have a realistic evaluation,
yeah,
your own stuff,
yeah,
then I think that would also help with being more grounded. It's kind of an ungrounded state.
it is an ungrounded state, and I think anything based on our afflictions is ungrounded. It's a sort of a disturbed state of mind, and you think of somebody like arrogance, pride. There's all I can say is inadequacy, a sort of deficiency underneath that, like self-doubt or so forth. Whereas, you know, with that grounded, you can just sit with yourself and let others be as well, you know. So that whoever, you know, the advice here is that whoever we're interacting with, hold them dear and supreme, hold them as precious. And if it comes to the difficult ones, they're most precious because I've got to practice harder. But, you know, even we have to correct something, we do that with an attitude of respect. If I think, you know, the priest Cedar, like I mentioned last week, that Geshe Langri Tangpa found, no, hold on, the other way around, isn't it? So the one who came after, Chökyi, Geshe Chökyi, the 7-point mind training, which is much more elaborate, unpacking this. And so he made the teaching of that public, right? So that anyone could engage, just like the Buddha didn't, you know, Buddha was born at a time the caste system was very entrenched, in the sense that anyone could follow a spiritual path, you had to be of the Brahmin caste. And not only that, males of the Brahmin caste. The Buddha cut across all of that. The Buddha had all classes of society, men, women, didn't matter. I mean, not didn't matter, inclusive. So very, very radical at that time, including the lepers, you know, Dalits, as they were called, the untouchables, who were generally outcast. And the same with Geshe Chökyi, the 7-point mind training. In fact, his teachings on the 7-point mind training, because he made that public, but also became known as the lepers Dharma, because he'd go and teach the lepers. He didn't say, oh, you know, you're lepers, I'm not going anywhere near you. So we can also think that, you know, again, the humility that all beings have Buddha nature, you know, animals, humans, all realms of existence have Buddha nature. They will become a Buddha, right? So to have a deep appreciation for their Buddha nature, I think enhances that idea of being respectful. So we're not saying we're worse than others, right? But we're just saying I can put others first. So, for example, we have, once we take refuge, of course, that we offer the first portion of our food and drink. We offer the best portion to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We offer on the altar. They don't need it, but it's for us to let go of that total self-absorption, self-cherishing, thinking, oh, I've got to have the best bit. But we can practice that too with others. You know, the convention of, you know, when you have a cake and nobody will take the last piece, you know, because you don't want to be seen as greedy, self-cherishing, you know. So maybe practice that with the first piece, not the last one. Giving the best, you know, giving the best to others. And we do that, like I think. Or we can think of, you know, so valuing helping us. So when we do our prayers when we do, you know, make that offering, we can make that offering to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all 10 directions, but also think of all the beings in all the 6 realms, in the God realms, in the human realms, in the animal realm, in the hungry ghost realm, in the hell realms. And even we haven't had the teachings on that, but if we had, it becomes more profound, that they all experience as bliss, as nectar, as sustenance, because currently that isn't the situation. So my very act of eating myself, I'm the one who's physically eating, but I'm benefiting all those beings in my mind. So I'm growing my mind that wishes to benefit others. It's completely about that. We can, you know, I mentioned about those who inspire us, and we just look at biographies of, you know, because the biographies I'm interested in are one of our, you know, sort of lineage holders, all the great Dharma scholars and so forth. But look at people greatly admired in history, and we think world leaders, and we can criticize a lot about different world leaders, but we look at what will go down in history is as those that have become role models that are, you know, being of benefit in the world. And we know that those who've exploited others and put themselves ahead of others go down in history, I'm saying, as unethical. So we can appreciate the ethics of others in such a degenerate time. So there's a lot of different ways we can look at it. And another thing is, maybe just end on this bit. Chökyi, the 7-point mind training, says transform or change your attitude. This is what all this mind training is about. And leave your external conduct as it is. So saying we're directing our attention to transforming within our souls. But again, it's not big noting. It's not like I'm wearing the badge of my Dharma practice. Even a friend of mine who, I mean, I've come about this. And so she, Dharma practitioner, she was new to the Dharma, and she, you know, from the beginning would wear her mala around her neck. And it gives you this idea, oh, do you know I'm practicing? People do that, I know, when they are practicing, just as it's conveniently present, you know, it's a convenience. And I know that, but when you wear it, it's a difference between just it being a convenience to have it there ready to go and being like, oh, no, because being Buddhist is being an inner being. It's not about ta-da, putting it out there in the world. It's transforming our mind. So we're not engaging in this or in any practice so that others will notice, you know. And in fact, I worked with this woman, and my boss, because she went away and she did one of the Vipassana Goenka style 10-day retreats, and she came back and she was a little bit mentally unstable. And so my boss then had qualms about Buddhists But then when I was the point where I was going off to ordain, she said, oh, I like Buddhists. You know, I've got a nun in my street and she walks her dog every morning. And, you know, so it wasn't all bad because I was like, oh, what's she going to say to me? So we, you know, and I know for myself, like before, you know, when I was preparing for ordination, and my mentor, a senior nun, said, don't change anything externally. Like, don't go and cut your hair short and wear all maroon. I mean, I did have a couple of maroon things that I wore, but not like total, you know. So in other words, which was very handy too, because it was keeping that private, which also protected me against what happened immediately was announced and Lamsa Rinpoche accepted. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And all I could think about was, I'm going to get ordained. I was like, I don't know. So in a way, it's holding our Dharma practice precious, our mind precious, you know, and holding that energy inwards, because that's what it is to be a Buddhist. So and just, you know, yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, you can.
With the pride you're saying, the ungrounded
Yes.
state, would it be more grounded to sort of acknowledge our good qualities and our faults?
Yes.
And
acknowledge our good
be okay with that or not?
Well, it's to be okay with it, to say, yeah, I've got these good qualities, and we need to do that because we put ourselves down and we don't acknowledge our good qualities often. And we rejoice in those, and we're wanting to cultivate that more and more. We are happier, those around us are happier, it's a win-win. And then the fault saying, yeah, I've got these faults.
Even
No.
with pride, like, oh, pride is a fault.
Yes. Yeah, I have the fault of pride. I'm unrealistic. What am I going to do about it? You know, so it's coming to acceptance. We're all a mixed bag. We've all got, one of my teachers used to say, stripy karma. Even with good intentions, there's a bit of, you know, mix in there. So we accept where we are, where we're at, and then say, okay, but I'm training on the path. Right? So I want to enhance those good qualities. And I want, in that case, got to do something about the negative one. So we don't beat ourselves up, nor do we get overinflated. So we've got to find that balance, you know, of realistic. You know, what the Buddha's teachings are all about, being more in sync with reality as it is.
Because sometimes you think, oh, you accept the faults as they are, you would not do anything about it.
Well, if you did not do something about it,
yeah.
but you accept, yes, we don't deny, going to know, oh no, jealousy, what do you mean? I'm never jealous. You hear people say like, oh, I'm never, really? What about this situation? What about that situation? So we just be realistic. The reason we're not realistic in that way is because, well, it's pride, it's ego. We don't want to be seen as having faults, right? But unless we accept it, it's like if someone comes to you with it, doesn't come to you with an illness, you can't help them. But if they say, I've got these symptoms, it's being realistic. You know, we've all got symptoms. It's a state of life. So, yeah. All right. We'll leave it there for today, and in fact for the rest of this month, isn't it? So as you know, a few of us are off to Indonesia with Geshe Zopa on pilgrimage. So we'll be resuming for September. I'm here for the whole of September. So, okay. Meantime, last week I said to learn the first verse off by heart. Now you can learn the second one off by heart and just reflect on it. I mean, it's not to be tested, do you know the words, but it gives you the opportunity to reflect on the meaning and what it means directly for you. You know, integrate it into your own heart. Okay, so dedicate. Page 8. First two verses. Ewa di nyudu da lama sangye dribgune drowa chikya malu pa de sala gopa sho chanchup sencho rinpoche makye panam ge kuchi ke pa nyampa me pa yam govne mondu wash. Next page, President Life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We can do it in English. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And the prayer for this wish be eternal of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Prajika Buddhas, victorious lo-jong, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore their armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the oceans of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And long life prayer for Tenzin Osel Rinpoche, Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. Foremost and holy Lama, to you for our supreme, we make this prayer of supplication. Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very much.